Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's 11:01. I'd like to start this press conference now. Today, we would have statements from the leader, executive member, Jarita Fernandes. If she can make it on, she's having some internet issues. If not, I would read her statement and from myself, and then we will have questions and answers. Just as before, when they come to the questions and answers, they'll be taken in order in which you have submitted your questions, and with the usual protocols will should be observed. Can I ask Kamraj to read his statement, please? Kamraj, you there?
Thank you very much. Am I on?
Yes, you're on.
Okay, thanks very much, David, and thanks for those journalists and press that saw it fit to turn up here this morning. I'll be doing a statement on the meeting with the ExxonMobil company recently, last week. Out of necessity, acting upon the numerous grave concerns brought to our attention by Guyanese of all walks of life, and in light of the fact that the PPP Civic has been missing in action in addressing these issues, both representatives of AFC and APNU requested and was granted an urgent meeting with Mr. Routledge, the country manager of ExxonMobil, and his team, which was held on the 22nd of April at the Leader of the Opposition's office. Could you kindly turn that off for me? Could you tell him to turn it off? Just give me 10, 20 minutes. In this introductory meeting, which set the stage for future meetings, we were given a briefing on the company's overall operations. Our opposition team queried why the production was reduced to 30,000 barrels per day, why flaring continued at high levels, the non-functioning of equipment, and whether Guyanese will have to bear costs of the repairs thereof, and what was the company's involvement in the gas to shore project. We made it pellucidly clear that, consistent with our record whilst in office, the opposition is committed to attracting foreign investments, but investors must conduct their business in a manner that is fully compliant with Guyana's laws protecting our people's health and safety, in consonance with strict application of environmental laws and practices, and consistent with Guyana's benefiting maximally economically. Mr. Routledge and his team was emphatic that these interests, namely safety, the environment, and the economy, are also what the company is tied to. It is noteworthy to remind that during the tenure in office, the coalition government made arrangements for the then PPP opposition to have routine independent meetings with the company without any interference. However, no such privileges or courtesies were granted to us by the PPP since their assumption of office to institutionalize such an arrangement. Unfortunately, the PPP government has been far from meeting its obligations of being forthcoming and transparent with information concerning the company's operations, hence the necessity for citizens turning to the APNU and AFC for help. We have been very active in Parliament, representing the people's interest in keeping matters of oil and gas concerns on the front burner and coming up with ways of addressing such matters. Our motion tabled before Parliament on the issue is intended to lay public a debate once and for all on this serious and harmful flaring matter, which has implications for the environment. Regrettably, the PPP has used its power to stifle any debate thereon since its tabling months ago via a lockdown of the National Assembly, a prorogation of by COVID means, it seems. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kamraj. Ms. Jarita Fernandes is on. Can I ask her to read her statement? Jarita?
Thank you, Mr. Patterson. If you can just bear with me for a few seconds, my connection is a little sloppy here.
Mr. Fernandez will be reading a statement on Guy Oil. You're on.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. My statement would actually be on some aspects of Guy Oil and also in GPL. It goes, the Alliance for Change notes the many disingenuous attempts by the PPP and their cronies who have been appointed as directors of state boards and other high offices to wiggle their way out and put a spin on revelations of malfeasance. Over at Guy Oil, the nation was scandalized when recordings were made public of directors and management staff openly soliciting bribes and kickbacks in return for approving the purchases of fuel. The very PPP that clamored for criminal charges to be brought against officials of the coalition and ordinary citizens on the most frivolous of accusations is now letting their corrupt cronies off with a slight slap on the wrist. The AFC demands a full and unfettered investigation by the Guyana Police Force into these reports and that criminal charges be brought against those involved. It is outrageous that the police has not been called in. Further, we believe that the entire board should be disbanded as there is evidence of attempts to breach the company's procurement policy and other members of the boards were aware of this. At the Guyana Power and Light, it may be that reports in the public domain of directors about to give themselves a 12% increase in remuneration that put an end to that plan. The futile attempt by the corporation to excuse the purchase of 2 luxury vehicles purportedly for use by the divisional directors of GPL is callous and shows a contempt that the board and the CEO of GPL have for the ordinary workers of the company and the people of Guyana. At a time when GPL is making excuses to pay workers a salary increase, the company is buying brand new vehicles for its senior management. Such decision-making practices shows the lopsided interests and the present corps of executive have, and reminiscence of pre-2015. We remind these executives that it is primarily the ordinary workers who keep power generation going, and it is the ordinary workers who collect revenue for GPL. On one hand, GPL bosses and the PPP are decrying the high cost of fuel, but on the other hand, GPL, which falls under the purview of the Prime Minister, is purchasing new vehicles. Clearly, priorities needs to be realigned at GPL. There is also questions of impropriety as one of the directors is a manager at the company that bid to provide a vehicle. This is a clear case of conflict of interest and shows the total disregard the board has for corporate good governance. What the nation is witnessing with these state corporations, GPL and Guy Oil, is the old PPP. Less than 1 year in office, and it is back to their old habits and where malfeasance is an acceptable modus operandi, and the proverbial fat hogs are allowed to rogue themselves in the throat of the public purse.
Thank you very much, Joeita. I will now read 2 statements, one on GPN procurement policies and the other on the gas to shore project. The AFC notes the ongoing corruption scandal involving procurement of fuel by Guy Oil, purportedly on behalf of GPL, with grave concerns, and it calls for an investigation to be launched into GPL's new procurement practices. The claim by a Guyot director that he met with the chairman of GPL over breakfast at the Princess Hotel, if true, is both troubling and an act of blatant corruption. Procurement matters for public entities is not a matter to be discussed and agreed by board members. Prior to August 2020, GPL procured fuel via long-term contracts after a public procurement process. It was a policy under the coalition administration that fuel supply to GPL was done under an open and transparent system. Eligible builders were invited to submit bids for a long-term contract based on the specifications, costs, and transportation of fuel to GPL. Bidders had to confirm that they can deliver the required amounts from an approved refinery for a fixed schedule, which is usually every 10 days before being awarded the contract. During the tenure of the coalition government, dozens of unsolicited bids were received for the supply of fuel to this entity. All such offers were declined since the regular, confirmed supply of fuel to GPL is critical to the smooth operations of this organization. The practice of purchasing from middlemen was completely discontinued from 2015, since it was deemed a recipe for inefficiency and corruption, as has been uncovered with the most recent scandal. On another related procurement award by GPL, it has been noted that members of the government have made claims that GPL has not executed any maintenance on their transmission lines for the last 4 years. This is a complete falsehood and is a disservice to the members of the company's transmission and distribution unit, one of the hardest working teams in the company. This unit has been working under the harshest conditions within some of the most challenging terrain and has been providing yeoman service, which enabled the company to reduce their line loss by 5% over the last 5 years. Their work resulted in saving GPL over $400 million annually. The AFC calls on the GPL board to correct this injustice to the hardworking employees of the company. For the record, the T&D team over the last 5 years has been conducting maintenance exercises on almost all of the major transmission lines in the Demerara-Berbice integrated system, coupled with regular maintenance on our distribution network. Due to the efforts of the T&D teams, GPL was able to progressively reduce the frequency and durations of blockouts between 2015 and early 2020. Something that has clearly regressed under the PPP administration. It is suspected that the background to these untruthful claims is to justify GPL entering into costly contracts with overseas contractors with no evidence of public procurement procedures being followed, thus bypassing their local in-house units and local contractors who are fully capable of executing these maintenance programs. Another example of money for the boys. The AFC calls for full investigation into the new procurement practices of GPL and considers board members liable for any and all uninvestigated and unchallenged diversions from applicable policies and procedures of procurement. Thank you, and I will now make a statement on the Wales Gas to Shore project. The AFC notes with satisfaction that the PPP has acknowledged the depth and quality of the studies undertaken during the coalition's stewardship of the oil and gas sector, and had to begrudgingly confess that they based their decisions to bring gas to shore solely on the studies undertaken during the coalition administration. However, we note that they have deliberately only highlighted the sections of these reports, these studies, that lend support to their unilaterally selected site, while ignoring other relevant and critical aspects of these studies. Irrespective of the basis, the decision to locate the gas site at Wales is premature, incomplete, and requires additional detailed studies. Importantly, none of the studies commissioned on the coalition administration recommends a site selected by the PPP, nor even support the costs the PPP are now associating with the Gas to Shore project. As a matter of fact, it is important to note that Wales was considered among 10 sites, but rejected in the studies. A value for money audit should be undertaken to determine the viability of the proposed cost of constructing an online pipeline for between $80 million US and $100 million US, as opposed to selecting a site closer to the shoreline and using these sums to do site clearance, protection, and filling. Conservative estimates indicate that such an approach is far more cost-effective. The PPP claims that urea will be a byproduct at the stated volumes of gas, which is 50 MFDs, which is million per day. This claim is not supported by any of the studies. In fact, the studies state that for urea production, a minimum excess amount of 70 MFD will be required. The projected excess amount of gas after utilization for power production is calculated at 15 MFD, which makes it uneconomical and impractical. Yet the PPP has used this promise as one of their justifications for moving ahead with the Gas to Shore project. We reiterate that more studies are needed on this project concept. The PPP has presented a proposal to install a LNG plant, which it claims will produce approximately 3,400 barrels a day. Noting that in Guyana's total liquefied petroleum gas usage, LPG, was approximately only 2,000 barrels per day. They have decided on a plant without provision of any plans for utilization of the excess volumes. The study clearly states that exporting this small amount is not economically viable. Under the coalition government, studies had commenced to assess the possibility of powering a revised public transportation system with this excess gas. Unless such studies are completed, any decisions on the Gas to Shore project remains premature and incomplete. The projected cost of $900 million US is exclusive of the cost of power generating plants, as well as transmission of the power to GPL distribution stations. The studies utilized by the PPP list the costs for the power plants and the transmission lines to be $240 million US and $85 million US respectively, which would make the total project cost approximately $1.25 billion US. This is an astonishing sum, which will be added to Exxon's cost recovery total during the next 5 years, thus further delaying the opportunity of our country's citizens to benefit from our national sources. What should be of great interest to the Guyanese public is that using these same studies, the coalition government planned to deliver a project that produced 188 megawatts of power plus 2,200 barrels of LNG daily for a price tag of under $600 million US. Half the amount that the PPP is demanding, and they have shown no additional value as a justification for these huge increases in expenditures. Once again, this is a typical money for the boys project. Further, based on the study, the quantity of gas, 50 million MFDs, being proposed to be utilized by the PPP can only be guaranteed available for 11 years, while the 30 MFD will be fully available for 18 years. The coalition based our decision to utilize a lower quantity of gas, which is the 30 MFD, not only because of the cost, but more so because of our commitment to transition the country to 100% renewables by 2040. The power generation study, which the PPP used, completed by the coalition, provided a roadmap for this transition, with the introduction of a mid-scale hydro plant project by 2030. The decision to expend an additional $600 million at the expense of 6 years guaranteed gas supplies is quite frankly voodoo economics. The AFC supports a gas to shore project. However, the project proposed by the PPP is not economically or environmentally sound or sustainable. We therefore demand that further detailed studies be conducted before the country is saddled with the greatest and largest ever PPP white elephant. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, that ends the statements on behalf of the Alliance for Change. I have questions from Adam Harris.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me, sir? No, I'm not hearing you.
Please proceed, Adam. Sorry, I muted myself.
All right. Now, this is quickly, sir. You responded to a statement made by the head of GPL, Barrett Dendale, on the 12th of April, when he said that there was no work done on the distribution system and all of that. You took 18 days to come out to say it's an untruth. Why is there this sloth in responding to matters of such national impact? It's the same thing, for example, with your comment on the oil to gas, sir. Again, Jagdeo had a press conference and he made all these statements. There was nothing, not even a press statement challenging it. Is the coalition just finding it difficult to respond in a timely manner to issues, sir?
Thank you very much, Adam. First and foremost, on the question of the 18 days wait, the statements that I read were made, that I heard were made by by Irfaan Ali when he installed the PUC, the new member of the PUC, and then it was repeated by Anil Nandalal. I immediately conferred with my notes and my handover and my records, and I was waiting, actually, to be honest, I was waiting for the GPL as the responsible persons to make a correction to that. Because of course, I can tell you that the transmission distribution team, some of the workers in their management as well, contacted me directly. And I said to them, why don't you raise this with your GPL board so they can correct it? So that was the question of my delay there. All of this that I am telling you are contained in a handover. I give the ministers a 300-page handover, and all of these are there. And I think the press, some of the press would have that report from GPL. So it's not a question of us waiting. The information was there out there before. I was simply saying that I thought that the GPL board would correct that because they're supposed to be representing all the workers. So I now confirm that, and I now call on them, challenge them to the entire board to challenge what I've just stated, that we did work on almost all. We had a schedule, and it was only disturbed by the COVID activities in 2020. And then I understand, obviously, that they would have resumed before. And the question of the gas to shore, I've been speaking about the gas to shore project for the last 5 years, Adam, in all fairness. The question on the decision on where they're going to go, the PPP and the documents there, that they shared were available on the website of my ministry, or the IDB, well, previous Ministry of Public Infrastructure. I was on the assumption that, and the whole country was on the assumption, that the PPP had conducted new studies to arrive by this decision. So, and they made that disclosure on Monday. that it did not. And today is Friday, and that I'm now making a statement at our press conference on the gas for sure, and the basis on which they arrived their decisions, challenging the whole numbers. All the numbers that I've called out, all the things have been in the public domain for the last, since I was looking at this project up to 2018.
Very well, sir.
I have Nazima.
Thank you. Mr. Patterson, or anybody else on the panel, what do you make of the president's comment that no fraud was committed when he was asked about the Guy Oil scandal? He's also moved to say that he has ordered that 2 of the persons be removed. What do you make of that? And Mr. Patterson, directly to you, is it highly unusual that the chairman of a board, his company would bid for vehicles, the purchase of vehicles? Is that something that is unusual? And to the Alliance for Change, the cybercrime bill has now been weaponized by a politician against a social media commentator. Do you still stand by that bill that you had passed when you sat in government? Thank you.
Thank you. I can ask Kathy to take the first one, which is on the president's comment that no fraud was there, and I'd ask Kemraj to take the cyber crime, and I will answer on the chairman of GPL bidding. Can we go in that order, Kathy?
Sorry, David, could you just repeat what?
The question, Nazima has asked, what is our take on the president saying that no crime has been committed at Guy Oil during the revelations of the fuel scandal?
Okay, I think instinctively I would want to relate the handling of this situation to the government's handling of similar but slightly different incidences where some suggestion of untoward activity has been suggested. And by that I mean that we have seen in the last couple of months several former officials of the APNU AFC administration being taken to the police station for discussion, for interrogation, into the court system, in many places, cases being charged. And therefore, I think in this specific situation, to have such blatant evidence of an attempt to defraud a state entity to the extent that this situation has shown us, and to have a response seem to be a simple tap on the hands is just unacceptable. The individual should be charged, should be made to go to the police should be investigating. They should possibly be charged and go through the same kind of interrogation until it is proven that no crime has been committed. I think this just shows the unfairness of which we handle situations. It always is dependent on who the individual is and not the nature of the crime or the opportunity to produce or to commit the crime. Many of the cases I'm referring to, there's not been a conviction. So again, you're going based on information that is being suggested exists, which is why you are launching a police police investigation, and certainly the same should apply for this.
Thank you, Kathy. Kemraj, can I ask you to respond to Ms. Ragabir's comment on the cybercrime bill and the question that is being weaponized?
Thanks very much, David. The cybercrime bill and act now was an act that we put together from the best practices of a number of Commonwealth countries. Are you hearing me?
Yes, Kemraj, you've been here perfectly.
Yeah, yes. And so it is important to understand that any new act that creates statutory crimes of what is happening must be seen for the need for them at the time that they were established. Like every other act passed in Parliament, you can have the gatekeepers, namely the Director of Public Prosecutions, the police legal advisors, ensuring that these acts are not weaponized. And indeed, what is left then is executive action ensuring that you do not abuse and discriminate in the application of these laws. And that is what we have seen here, quite frankly. So to address the question very directly as to whether now we seem to regret that we passed the Cybercrime Act, I would want to say, no, we don't regret that, but we must have the actual executive branch, the DPP and the police legal advisors and so on, understanding the parameters and the red lines that they must not cross in relation to dealing with these cybercrime matters, and not to weaponize them to the extent of abuse and discrimination.
Thank you, Kemraj. And to your question about the unusual, the chairman of a GPL, let's be very, very specific. And also, I think he's the CEO of the company that has the dealership for Kia, sitting, I think. Absolutely, Nazima. Absolutely. You can't sit on a board and have the board adjudicate on an award on which you're a party. It's a clear issue of conflict of interest. And let me tell you how GPL procurement goes. So the chairman would know, one, in advance, because obviously the decision to go to procure vehicles would be known, has to be approved by the board even before it's advertised. The budget for which they will have, the board has, GPL has for the vehicles, will be known by the board before it even even advertises specifications. So being a member of the board, you can influence the specifications of the vehicles that you want to bear, or for any other tender, you can influence it. The engineer's estimate and everything like that goes to the board. Additionally, GPL is like this, is that the board of directors forms what you call a tender committee. So the tender committee that evaluates the board submissions and tenders is chaired by a member of the board of directors. Under my tenure, the chairman was at that time, I think, the representative from the Private Sector Commission. I don't know who the current chairman of the tender board commission. So therefore, you have the chairman of the board knowing all the prerequisites and approving the whole budget, all the pre-tender analyses and so things like that, submitting a bid. A board member who sits on that board as the chairman of the tender board, he assesses and he assessed and approved that bid. Nazim, I want to remind you about a couple of things. While the coalition is in power, there was several articles in editorials in newspapers. I can remember Stabrook News, Kaieteur News, Transparency International, the Defenders of Guardians of Democracy, and all the so-called persons who wanted to uphold the rule of law, writing on the issue of conflict of interest. You can remember how there was issues when Minister Hughes was accused because she was in cabinet and her husband opened an oil and gas firm. You can remember that. That is so far removed it was, but there was a hue and cry. Here you have a board member, chairman, sitting in a board approving a tender, and then when it goes out to tender, the company which he is, another company which he's involved with, has been awarded a tender. That's a clear breach and conflict of interest case. You know what I mean? Could be no clearer than that. Obviously, it is disappointing that to hear how quiet and silent the rest of the civil society is on this matter, and on the matter of Guy Oil as well. you mean the board sit down discussing procuring fuel from a agent who's not even registered and there's no repercussions whatsoever. I mean, that's unheard of under the coalition time, but the civil society is right. So it is a clear case of conflict of interest. And no excuse from the board to say that the chairman recused himself or anything like that can suffice. You can't, when you accept the chairmanship, just like any public office, when you accept the chairmanship, there's certain sacrifices that you're required to make. Thank you. I have a question from Wendell Badri and then Ms. Percival.
Hi, good morning, Mr. Patterson and members of the panel. Kindly excuse any noise you're hearing in the background. On the move at the moment. Now, the question I have is for Mr. Patterson or Mr. Ramjatan, and it has to do with the Gas to Shore project. The panel recently announced that they relied on some studies conducted between 2016 and 2020. That would speak to the time that the APNU AFC coalition was in office. Could you verify that these studies were indeed carried out, at least 5 of them, by the APNU AFC? And secondly, shoots, I forgot the second question. Let me come back to that, please.
Right. Well, just a question. Sean News was before Mrs. Percival, so please, sorry about that. Look, let's give you a quick history. All of those studies that were there were conducted by the APNU AFC government. The first study, as you see, the Berkman study, the power generation. We commissioned that since 2015 or early 2016. I think the report was out in 2016 or 2017. And that was a report on how we can transition, and funded by the IDB, how we can transition the country from fossil fuel to renewables by 2040, as I mentioned in my press release. So that was commissioned by us in October 2015. We requested that of the IDB. The second report, which you see, is Energy Narrative. That was also commissioned by my ministry in association with Minister Trotman. In 2017, when Exxon first confirmed, and I've said this, I mean, and I'm saying this again to Adam Harris, I've been saying it, Exxon started off in 2015 by saying that how they wanted to flare all the gas, because that's the fastest way for them to go to early production, and we told them no. Then they came back to say they'll have to re-inject all the gas to make the project sustainable. And we asked them to see if there's any possibility of having excess gas piped to shore. And in February of in the late 2016, early 2017, they responded by saying that the 30 to 50 can be available. At that time, we wanted an independent assessment, because that's all we got. So we wanted it. We wanted it for the people of Guyana. We didn't want to go through any of the international financing agencies, because they have, quite frankly, everybody has their own interests and things like that. Because most of them, when they do a study in such a way, the reports ends up such a way that they're the person who can fund it. So we contacted IDB and the World Bank, and we got the names of, I think, about 6, or GEA got the name of 6 or 7 different persons. And we went to MPTAB, and we did a selective tender. Energy Narrative, the company won, and their name were recommended by the IDB. They were the ones that did it. The project was funded by the Ministry of Natural Resources, and they confirmed and they gave us the initial basis of which we continued. And of course, after that report, the IDB and us engaged them to do further follow-up. The question, the fourth one, which is the KNM power generation, that was commissioned directly by the Ministry of Public Instruction, my ministry at the time, to examine the actual power generation of the power plants and those things like that. And the final one on the Japan master plan, that was done for the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, under Vice President Carl Greenidge at the time. So yes, all 5 studies were commissioned by the coalition.
Mr. Patterson, I just remember my second question. It has to do with the president admitting that there is a lack of resources to stave off domestic and external threats. So how does the Alliance for Change propose to treat with this very serious matter, especially in the face of rising crime in the country?
I would ask Kamraj to respond on that and be the former Minister of Public Security.
Thank you very much, David. Look, we have approximately $300 million in the Federal Reserve Bank. We are not short of money. And when we passed the Natural Resources Fund Act, we created a bureaucracy that is going to make minimal the politicians of the day spending and withdrawing that money. I think that is what is causing Jagdeo to give the impression that we don't have the resources. Let the various committees, one I think is a Public Accountability Committee, one is an Investment Committee, one is another committee, and then you go to the National Assembly to ensure that monies in that Federal Reserve can be spent. We have also limitations as to how much can be spent presently. But with emergencies like public security emergencies, the surge in crime, that definitely is an emergency that could cause us to go there, constitute these various committees that the Natural Resources Fund Act talk about, and then get the money from them, from that fund, and so that we can deal with all the issues that we have. This same COVID thing, we are saying that if there can be a second round of COVID relief, and if you got vaccination hesitation right now, pay monies to those areas that you know the 25,000 that you will give again, you have to take the jab before you get the next $25,000. That is important because if we do not vaccinate the whole country, we'll have a public security problem too. That will be an emergency. And so we would like to utilize that fund, go in there. Rather, I suppose the PPP doesn't want to go into that fund because of the safeguards as to how you spend the money and the Public Accountability Committee that is going to ensure that it is spent very well. They don't want that. They went and they jacked up the borrowings level, one by $250 billion, the other by $400 billion. And so that they now could go and borrow and spend as Ashley Singh and Bharat Jagdeo wants. Whereas the Natural Resources Fund Act would have made sure that there is a set of people, a committee that will be constituted, lawyers, accountants, whatever it is, and a kind of a bureaucracy that is non-political, that would have ensured that monies can be obtained there and then be spent on these emergencies that we have at hand.
Thank you, Kamraj. Sean News and then Ms. Percival.
Good morning. Good morning to everyone. Two questions. First, my question to you, Mr. Patterson. Could you give us a direct response to the president's statement and remarks at his press conference that there is massive, in fact, there is massive fraud at GOIL that they're presently investigating that were inherited from the coalition government. I know you said earlier in your remarks that there were systems in place to negate such. And I don't know if yourself or anyone on the panel will respond. Also, the president was asked about the substantial confirmation of a police commissioner, the Chief Justice and Chancellor. And he tied those to Mr. Arman's response to the Chief Justice's ruling on the second petition and saying what can he do and how can he work around that, not giving a direct response as to what will happen with these things. What will be the AFC's response to his statement, not indicating whether they will be conform or not?
Kamraj, the last one, the confirmation, I think we're on public record, but you can repeat it and then I'll speak on GOIL.
Okay, well, look, the important point about the commissioner's appointment, I think you'd have to consult with the leader of the opposition, and we would like to see the next one that was in line, and that is Mr. Hoppe, be appointed. If Mr. Hoppe is not appointed, well, that of course we say is a decision that the president has to make. And I rather suspect that they are trying to run away from the next person in line, which is, in accordance with public service rules and things like that. And also because of the competency of Nigel Hoppe. In relation to the Chief Justice and Commissioner, the Chancellor, we have already made statements that these appointments should be made. And we are not going to shift from that position. Janet Cummings has proven herself as Chancellor, acting so long, having a lot of her decisions at the CCJ being affirmed. And we feel also that the Chief Justice, Roxanne George, notwithstanding what some people might want to feel, she is a quality judge to the extent of her being appointed as Chief Justice. And the appointments should be made quickly. Remember, the appointments should be made by the president with agreement from the opposition leader. And I suspect, I remember, I think a couple of weeks ago or a month ago or so, the leader of the opposition saying to make those appointments.
Correct.
Notwithstanding the fact that we might have disagreements with judgments, we have that all the time as lawyers. That does not mean that the people are not fit and proper candidates for these two positions. So it is important now that, because I understand that the president, Ariel Fanali, when he was in opposition, had indicated that this should be the case. Appoint the people. Why such a long dragged out situation? Now we have indicated, well, fine, go right ahead. And you are in a position to do that. That's my
Sean, on the question I was speaking about on Gayol's issue, that's a smoke screen with the what the president is saying about the Gayol issue. You know what I mean? That's the Auditor General and the police are looking into that. That's a question I think he's talking about. Question he's speaking about with GDF collecting fuel and those things like that. And that's been in the public domain for quite some while. So there's no massive scandal that Gayol taking, but it's a smoke screen. He's trying to deflect from his current issues by throwing things once back again onto the coalition. Where there's corruption, there's corruption. If there was corruption then, he should prosecute that to the fullest extent of the law. There is corruption now, we should prosecute that to the fullest extent of the law. And when I made reference to procurement policies at GPL and fuel, look, one of the second most smuggled thing in this country, in Guyana, is fuel after drugs, right? And we know that, and we did several things we put in place while the sector was under the coalition to curb fuel smuggling. And one of the things that we ensured is that no middleman can bring in 17,000 barrels. He brought 17,000 barrels in the country. It's here, and he's wanting payment for it. He passed GA. He got past GRA, and he brought in 17,000 barrels. He brought a ship with 17,000 barrels in a fuel. And of course, when it's arrived now and the deal has changed, he's then is when the story broke out. Everybody, as I said in my statement, almost every other month, somebody would write and say, well, they have access to fuel at this low price and this low price, and we can sell GPL or Transport to Harvest, which was under me, and it'd be so much saving to the country and those things like that. But that's not the way to run a public utility. You need consistency, you need standards, specifications, and those things. That is why we, under my tenure, on the coalition tenure, you had long-term contracts. Stastoli had the contract for 3 years straight. Then another company, which I think got it, then Stastoli won it again, up to when I left Stastoli, which is the Surinamese oil company, which is right next door to us from their refinery. They were the main fuel suppliers, and they supply fuel every 10 days. The question of you going at breakfast and discussing this and those things like that, somebody has a load of fuel, you don't even know what it is, and they bring it into your country, and when it's landed here, money you fall out because of payment. That's not the way to run a corporation like GPL.
We must also
consistency of supply. You must be guaranteed, the supply there. Not and that, as I understand, one of the reasons we had this tremendous blockouts now. Shortage of supply and fuel and those things like that. And then, of course, as you heard in the fellow from Aaron Royalties, they unilaterally jacked up the price so that they could get cutbacks. So no, that's a smoke screen what he's talking about under the coalition government. All acts of corruption should be investigated, including this one. And this one here is it's clear as day, there's documented evidence for it.
I just want to add a point here, and please allow me the privilege, David. It
Yes.
has to do with the US embargo of buying oil from Venezuela and certain other countries. And these countries also wanting to sell. Now, the government knows that they can't go and bypass the embargo like that. And so that is why it is also an investigation should be gone into these questions as to whether they wanted to bypass certain embargoes out of Venezuelan oil. And that is why they could ask these middlemen to get it for them and bring it offshore there and a whole host of things. And I want to make the statement that the Americans must understand this thing. It's the same thing with the gold that is coming over from Venezuela now in very big ways, and then being used to fund an administration that the Americans do not want, especially. So it is important that all these fuel smuggling, gold smuggling, and so on can put us in a real bad spot with the USA. And we must not allow middlemen to do these wickedness at all. They should be charged.
Thank you, Kemraj. You raised a very good point. I mean, what's the origin of the fuel? Where did it come from? I have Ms. Percival, and then Wendell, you have your hands up again. Ms. Percival has asked a question. Does the AFC agree with the position taken by the leader of the opposition on the judiciary following Monday's ruling on petition 88 of 2020? Kemraj, I think that is.
Look, I want to say that we have a right to express our views, sometimes very strongly. It can be sometimes for certain people very too strong. But I believe that the leader of the opposition in exhorting what it is that he felt, or in a sense, stating how he felt about the decision just after the decision was given, is not in any way, an attack of the judiciary, in my mind. I heard about even worse words being used by Bara Jagdeo when injunctions were granted in relation to certain matters brought by Miles Fitzpatrick and a battery of senior counsel a couple of years ago. And you have to take it in good stead. The important point here is that freedom of expression is the hallmark of our democracy too. Respect for the judiciary, yes, but freedom of expression. And I always go back to that very famous Lord of England, Lord Denning, who says that yes, criticism must come against our decisions, because our decisions rest on surer foundations than that which the politicians might say. I am certain that Roxanne George, Chief Justice, is not unhappy about the situation, because every day whenever she gives decision, a certain party in the court will be vexed with it and probably will utter words. And so it should not be regarded. Of course, the PPP is trying to exploit it as if we do not want. But that same opposition leader, a couple months ago, as I just said, has indicated should be appointed full-time and substantive Chief Justice. So, don't try to exploit the comments made by the leader of the opposition and to carry it too far. Indeed, sometimes we get disgusted with certain judges' decision, but after expressing it, well, we have to live with it. And I'm certain the leader of the opposition will abide by the decision until, of course, you get an appeal and that appeal will reverse it or so.
Thank you, Kemraj. Mr. Badri has submitted his question by text, and I read it, Kemraj. The president recently highlighted that some $1 billion has been set aside for hinterland agricultural development. However, a major issue for many indigenous communities is access to market to sell their produce. That issue was recently highlighted to the president at his press conference, in which he responded that the goal is to allow these communities to become self-sufficient while seeking their produce selling their produce to neighboring villages and campsites. Do the AP and UAFC believe it is adequate? And if not, what should be done to ensure greater access to markets for these communities? Kamraj, agriculture?
Yes, we support monies being spent in the hinterland for agricultural purposes. We believe that too much goods have to leave the coast to go into the hinterland, and we do have good arable lands in the interior, which should now be cultivated. And of course, the next thing is the marketing. I rather suspect that there should be a study by certain experts, and we have lots of experts in Guyana who can deal with agricultural marketing. Of course, I am not too savvy on the subject, but now that you're going to spend $1 billion there on our hinterland communities, you can spend a couple $1 million to do a survey or a study as to how we can promote the markets for these items, and also to come up with a package of recommendations as what further monies could be spent in these hinterland communities to get the cultivation and marketing going so that it could become a profitable enterprise rather than a set of very, what can be regarded as anti-green activities like cutting down the forest and mining. So I would want to say at this level, I support the president to the extent of that, but also would want him to go further, or the administration to go further, to get some studies done as to how we can best get the marketing going and other infrastructure that is going to help with the marketing.
Before I continue, Kathy wanted to add, elaborate on the question of security. Can you do so now? That the question
certainly. In fact, 2 points I want to make. The first one is in relation to Kamraj's response just now, and then I'll come to the security. We forget that, or I think sometimes we fail to recall the infrastructure that was put in place. And when we talk about marketing, the fact that today, I can tell you that I have received no less than about messages from about 6 locations in the hinterland where we had put internet access, and that access has now been switched off. David Patterson, Mr. Patterson, you will know that you sent me firsthand a response, a message from Fairview, just outside of Iroquois, where they had internet that is now switched off. And this is where it impacts on marketing opportunities that I wanted to highlight. Some may recall the project that we did with the women in Arnaputa. And we actually did a video highlighting the fact that these women were able to produce peanut butter. And as they are able to produce the peanut butter because they have internet and are connected to outlets in the hinterland and in Georgetown, and by a simple email to the women in Arnaputa, you can send your orders and they can produce and send it to you. Similarly, you will know that when we went to Monkey Mountain and we established internet in Monkey Mountain and at the Lapidary, it was so that persons right there at the Lapidary could sell their stones, not only within Guyana to any jeweler, but within the region, the Caribbean region. And that's why I'm saying that it's a little disheartening that we're not asking the questions on these situations. Because when we talk about marketing in a COVID time, 90% of the markets could be reached through the internet. I have had persons suggest to me that the government is no longer funding the cost of the internet to these more than 72 hinterland locations that we left with VSAT dishes and internet in place? And this is the question that we should be asking. When it comes in relation to education, there's a lot of talk about these scholarships, but all the programs are online. To what extent have we built on the infrastructure that we left that will now allow persons to do more training online? Again, we have reports, and I said a couple of weeks ago that the department at the National Data Management Authority that had persons in the regions, persons that were hired from the regions to manage the technology in these locations had been closed down. So this is one of the realities. I wanted to add finally to Wendell's question about crime and security. And again, I want to remind persons of the $37 million project that was funded by the Caribbean, alone through the Chinese government and Huawei. And I want to remind people that a state-of-the-art command center was established. That command center, we had already, when we departed office, established more than 120 cameras around the city. There is no reason, and those cameras have live real-time connection to the command center. The media were invited, and I did a press tour of that command center. That command center has a video display that has every single camera in the city that had been set up, feeding into that command center. We had already, and I demonstrated the portable Wi-Fi equipment that police officers were being given, the handheld radios, the phones, all with internet access. And you know that we had a team already in place managing that command center. I say this to explain that there's absolutely no reason why a crime should take place outside a key location in the center of Georgetown, at the corner of Middle and Camp Streets, and in a matter of time, the police and the information being sent to that command center could not be used to ensure that we find solutions to these crimes in a short space of time. And I remind persons that one thing that was always highlighted during our years in office was the fact that how come we were able to solve crime and to publicize the results in such a short space of time? And therefore, the infrastructure is there. By now, the cameras should have expanded to Berbice and to Quarantine and be feeding into the e-government network to ensure the safety of Guyanese citizens. Thank you for allowing me to give those few clarifications.
Excellent.
Right, very good. Ms. Percival, your hands up, or you, or it just never came down? Okay, right. Are there any other questions from anyone? Great. No, there being no other
Yes, sorry, so this is a late one. Again, I would like you to, or someone on the team to again comment on the COVID relief. The pink slip persons are complaining that since last year, November, when the program was introduced until now, there haven't been any relief for persons who collected the pink slip. And there are even persons who were skipped, who were legitimately qualified for the grant that was not given the grant. In terms of the audit, in terms of ensuring that this relief is given to persons in a timely manner as the pandemic rage. What is the AFC's position?
I saw Kamrad jump up there quickly. Okay, Kamrad, you can start first.
No, yes, and I think we can have contributions from the rest. Look, this thing about the distribution of the first COVID relief has a lot of corruption about it. Not only was there corruption, but there was discrimination. And what it means now is that there should be an investigation. At least the Auditor General should be asked to do an investigation, and we should have on the computer here or wherever they would have their database, all those Guyanese by name and address who got the monies. All. And then who got pink slips and so then did not get the money. And then we can do an arrangement whereby, by virtue of a process of elimination of those names, know who now should get the monies. It is important in this digitized age, as Kathy was just mentioning, catching criminals and all of that, smart city projects and so on. We could have smart city here in that regard to tell us who got the monies. And then we will see also those who were, in a sense, distributing. These are the PPP people who were distributing this money, and they were getting big pay for doing that. So it is clearly a situation whereby we have a lot of discrimination and corruption in that money. And we feel that there should be a second tranche that should be given. And well, it is my personal opinion, it will also cause people to back away from vaccination hesitancy. Those who, especially in the Amerindian areas, that via a number of reasons they don't want to take it. Well, if you want the next $25,000, you have to come and get a jab. And we have to speak to them about that. That is my statement on it right now.
Yes.
David, can I add a comment to that?
Of course, Kathy.
Sean, I want to kind of turn your question around. I want to say that the onus, if the current government maintains that they have had a fair process in the allocation of the COVID relief grant, then it is the onus is on the government to prove and to reassure all the citizens of this country that there was no deliberate victimization. And therefore, as Kemraj mentioned, in this day and age, it is easy. It is absolutely easy to ask persons that did not receive it to call a certain 1-800 a free number, to go to a website and put their details in. There are millions of ways that they can track who did not get it and make restitution. The fact that in all these months that has not happened, right? There has been no overwhelming statement that says, we want to ensure that everybody legitimately gets this. So Susan and John, if you didn't get it, please call so-and-so at this number and we will get out to you immediately. That kind of urgency and response has been totally absent. And that's why I say to you, Sean, you have a tremendous power to be able to ask the questions to the government, to the Ministry of Social Protection in that context. It is for them to convince us that what they say is accurate and there has been no discrimination. And so we hope to see over the next couple of weeks, persons that didn't get receiving their benefit. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. There being no other questions, Sean.
Yeah, Mr. Patterson, if you'll allow me very quickly, please.
All right, Wendell.
Yeah, so just a very quick update on local government elections, any word on that? And secondly, with regards to the PAC, the speaker said that meetings would be suspended due to fears of persons contracting COVID, and the use of technology would be applied. But to date, we haven't heard anything in that regard. So could you make pronouncement on those two matters, please? Thank you.
Quickly, Wendell, on the PSC and the resumption of committee meetings, I mean, obviously, it's out that we haven't been, the Parliament hasn't indicated if they, when they will be resuming parliamentary committee meetings. Obviously, when that is done, a combination of virtual and in-person may be to be considered. But obviously, the Parliament has to make the environment safe, And then after that, we will look at it. So we haven't had that indication as yet. Hopefully, everyone that has contracted the COVID virus has recovered, and they've been able to sort out the issue. But we'll wait on Parliament to let us know when they're ready, and then we'll proceed as the best way possible. Virtual, hybrid system, I would suppose. And your other question was on
local government.
Local government. Yes, local government, as you know, we said it the last time that local government is a constitutional requirement. However, we are demanding that there is a new household registration, and obviously, and that is the reasons have been expounded for so many times before. And as a party, we are waiting, and we will not be going to local government elections without a new household registration. We said this before. I think GCOM is quite aware of our position, and we do hope that they get on with a new household registration. Every single report from all the observers strongly recommend that you have a new registration before elections.
Sorry, I just wanted to press a little bit further, because we heard commitments from the government saying that they are committed to holding the elections. And then we heard the Minister of Local Government, like many other persons in government, saying that they cannot get into any form of elections unless the secretariat, persons at the secretariat are removed. You're saying that the voters list, you can't go into the elections without house-to-house registration. So we have a kind of stalemate there. Are we going to see perhaps local government election this year, as is constitutionally required? I know the ball is in the government's court, but what will you do to ensure that it is held?
Look, sorry, Kamran, you go first.
Yeah, look, it will be very serious a matter. This government has shown its background behavior in relation to local government. From 1994, when we had the first one on the Cherry Jagan, we did not have back any. It does not like local government democracy, as it doesn't like democracy in any event. So it is important to understand their behavior. They are going to make all manner of things. The Elections Commission will have to deal with their officers in there. Why the government is making all a big show? We feel that a house-to-house registration exercise that is brand new, that will get the voters list for these NDCs, was so important for free and fair elections that must be done. And the calls that the government will want to be making is but distractions and deflections again, because GCOM will have to conduct the elections based on a fair proper list, and that is what we want. So if they do not have local government elections, it will be again a violation of our constitution, a violation of our democratic rights, and it might be a serious recipe for all manner of things happening. We might have to go back to court, or even worse, you might have demonstrations on the street. It could very well be a recipe for I don't want to let it happen at all, but a recipe for riots if you're going to deny us local government elections.
Right. Thank you very much,
Can I
colleague.
say something? One
Yes,
last thing. Wendell, I think that again, we have to consider, we all know the difficult year that we have had as a country, and all Guyanese have had the challenge of suffering in some way, shape, or form. And I think you know that healing and reconciliation are important tenets of the Alliance for Change, which we still hold very dear. Now, when it comes to local government elections and elections in general in this country, we could not have had a worse scenario than we had in 2020. Anybody that is truly interested in the future development and safety of this country will want to ensure that we get a proper new list, because that list was supposed to be in effect even before 2020. We weren't supposed to go into 2020 with the list with so many questions. And the fact that people have no confidence, most people, nearly 50% of the population have no confidence in that existing list, that is enough to make sure that you start fixing the list. So that has to be, anybody that means well for Guyana will put the house-to-house registration process high on the list. Because with a proper new list, with a clean list, we then can talk and go into elections and then ensure that GCOM delivers a free and fair election that we can commit to. I think this is very, very important. Thank you, David.
Thank you very much, Kathy, and thank you very much, members of the press, for joining us for this AFC press conference. I think Kathy will be circulating the written statements shortly at appropriate medium, as well, and you can actually have follow-ups with her, Kathy. So we'd like to thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week once again. Thank you and good afternoon.